Hey everyone, I'm Harper Mitchell. I'm 29 years old, and I want to tell you about the time my sister invited me to be her maid of honor and how it turned into one of the hardest, most defining experiences of my life. It started with a wedding invitation. A cream-colored envelope arrived at my door with rose gold calligraphy and one of those fancy wax seals. Tucked inside was a note in my sister Madison's handwriting. Harper, I'd love for you to be my maid of honor. I'm not going to lie, I cried. We hadn't been close in years, not since I joined the military. Conversations between us had gotten fewer and colder. So when I read that note, I thought maybe this was a second chance, a bridge, a way back to each other. I should have known it wouldn't be that easy. Madison has always had strong opinions about my life, especially about my decision to enlist, but I didn't expect things to go sideways so fast. The day before the rehearsal dinner, she pulled me into her bedroom. Her tone was sharp, her eyes scanning me like I was something under inspection. You can't wear white to any of the events, she said. You're not pure. I didn't say anything right away. I just nodded, but something inside me cracked a little. Not from shock, because honestly, it was just so typical of her, but from the quiet pain that comes with realizing someone still sees you as less, no matter what you've been through. Before I get deeper into this story, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And if you've ever had to stand your ground when it mattered most, make sure you subscribe. This story is for you. Let's go back for a minute. Madison and I grew up in Fairfield, Connecticut, in this perfect little colonial house. White picket fence, blue shutters, freshly painted every spring by our dad. From the outside, we looked like the classic American family. But inside, Madison and I couldn't have been more different. She's 3 years older. From the moment she was born, she was the golden child. Slept through the night at 2 weeks old. That was my mom's favorite story at every family gathering. Me? I was the colicky baby who kept them up for months. As kids, Madison was the one in beauty pageants with her perfect blonde curls and that dimpled smile. She brought home straight A's, played violin in the youth orchestra, and said please and thank you without being reminded. My mom dressed her in these adorable dresses with lace collars and shiny shoes, and Madison loved it. Then there was me. I had wild, dark hair, the kind that refused to be tamed, and I liked catching frogs more than playing with dolls. I climbed trees in my church clothes and asked too many questions in Sunday school. My report cards always had the same notes. Harper is bright, but she challenges authority, or Harper needs to learn when to speak. But the soundtrack of my childhood, that was one sentence on repeat. Why can't you be more like your sister? Every time Madison won something or got praised, I'd see Mom's eyes drift over to me with that look, that disappointment, that quiet sigh. I'll never forget the night Madison won Miss Teen Fairfield. I was 13, and she was up on stage in this glittering blue dress, answering questions about world peace, like she'd been trained by diplomats. The whole crowd erupted when they announced her name. My hands were sore from clapping. Later that night, I snuck into her room and found her tiara on the dresser. I put it on, looked in the mirror, and just tried to picture what it felt like to be her, to be enough. Madison walked in. I froze. I thought she'd yell, but instead she came over, adjusted the tiara on my head, and looked at me in the mirror. You could do pageants too, you know. I shook my head. Not my thing. She frowned. Because you're afraid you wouldn't win? No, I said. Because I don't want to be judged on how I look, or how well I can fake caring about whatever cause is popular that month. Her smile disappeared. That's not fair, Harper. I do care. I know. We're just different. And we were. In every way that mattered. Madison followed the map our parents laid out 4.0 GPA early admission to Princeton polished boyfriend from a good family, and eventually a job in marketing in Manhattan. I questioned everything. I dated a guy in a grunge band. I hiked alone on weekends. And I joined the Army. That was the moment everything changed. Senior year, while everyone else was worrying about college apps, I was quietly meeting with a recruiter. I didn't tell anyone, not until the papers were signed. At dinner, I dropped the bomb. I enlisted. Silence. My mom dropped her fork. My dad spilled his water. And Madison. She looked at me like I was trash on her designer shoes. "You're throwing your life away," she said. "I'm serving my country," I argued. "Getting training a future. Getting yourself killed," she cut in. That night was the beginning of the deep freeze between us. I left for basic training. Madison didn't come to see me off. My parents did barely. "We still love you," my dad said awkwardly at the bus station, like I'd done something shameful instead of something brave. Madison. She was starting her junior year at Princeton. She sent maybe 3 emails in the next year. Most were about her, grad school, her boyfriend Ryan, whose family had more old money than a museum, her new job. She never asked about me, never asked what it was like, what I'd seen, what I'd lost. It was easier for her not to know. So when that wedding invite came with her asking me to be maid of honor, I was stunned and hopeful. "Are you sure?" I asked her on the phone. "Of course," she said, hesitating just a second too long. "Ryan thinks family should be central. And his family is very traditional." There it was. She didn't choose me because she missed me. She chose me because I fit the image they wanted. Still, I said yes. Because I wanted to believe this could be our turning point. I got leave approved. Booked my flight. Bought a simple navy dress for the engagement party. Nothing fancy. Just something respectful. But Madison found offense in everything, and it was only the beginning. 2 weeks before the wedding, I flew into Connecticut and moved back into what used to be my bedroom. Only now, it was a home office with a pull-out couch and a half-deflated exercise ball wedged under the desk. My mom had placed a vase of fresh peonies on the table with a card that read, "Welcome home, Harper." It felt polite, distant, don't you? Like I just returned from a long vacation, not from a third tour overseas. That first night, Madison and Ryan hosted a welcome dinner at the Westport Club. The place was so fancy, it didn't even have a sign out front, just a doorman in a suit that probably cost more than my entire month's paycheck. Ryan's father, Howard, was a federal judge. His mother, Eleanor, had a last name that was plastered on half the libraries and concert halls across New England. As I walked in, I felt every pair of eyes glance in my direction and linger just a second too long on my military short hair and no-nonsense heels. "So you're in the service?" Eleanor asked, her tone flat. "Like I just said, I fixed microwaves for a living." "Army," I replied. 8 years now. "How interesting," she said, already turning away to talk to Madison about floral arrangements. Ryan was fine. Polite. Polished. He looked like the kind of guy who owned multiple watches for different types of meetings. When he laughed, it was soft, rehearsed. Madison clung to his arm like a decorative accessory, glowing as she gushed about wedding details, never once looking at me as more than a checklist item she had to drag across the finish line. I told myself to let it go. This wasn't about me. This was her wedding. But the next day, things hit a new level. We had our first bridesmaid dress fitting at an upscale boutique in Greenwich. The kind of place that served champagne in crystal flutes and had a wait list just to walk through the door. The other bridesmaids were already there when we arrived, 3 of Madison's sorority sisters and Ryan's sister, Jillian. All of them had that same glossy, curated look, highlighted hair, expensive purses, and air kisses that landed next to each other's cheeks. "Harper," they chorused like they'd just been practicing it backstage. The tone was a little too cheerful. A little too, "Oh, you're the military sister." Everyone, this is my sister, Madison said, like she had to clarify just in case they thought I was hired security. One of the girls, Amber, or maybe Ashley, I couldn't tell, said thank you for your service. Another chimed in. We're so glad you could get leave for this. Madison was worried you might be, deployed. I wouldn't miss it, I said with a tight smile. Madison had picked blush pink off the shoulder dresses with flowing chiffon overlays. When I stepped out of the dressing room, I could already see the wheels turning in her head. She zeroed in on my right shoulder. We're going to need to fix that, she said, pointing. That was a thick scar, a permanent reminder of an IED blast in Afghanistan. I can wear a shawl, I offered. I was really trying to be accommodating. And your posture? She continued. You stand like a soldier. Can you try to look softer? And your hair, we're doing extensions. You'll need them. For the next hour, I stood as the boutique staff poked and pinned and pulled at the dress. Madison directed them like a general inspecting troops. Only her war was against anything that disrupted the aesthetic. Maybe long gloves, Jillian suggested helpfully. In June, I replied, forcing a laugh. It didn't stop there. At bridal luncheons, I sat quietly while they discussed handbag brands I'd never heard of. At planning meetings, I nodded through endless debates over whether the table linens should be blush or bashful. At a tasting, I suggested a chocolate raspberry cake. Madison scrunched her nose. That's not sophisticated, she said. I let it slide. Over and over, I let it all slide because I wanted to be the bigger person. I wanted to be supportive. I wanted to believe there was still a chance to repair what we'd lost. Then came the rehearsal dinner planning. I was helping my mom address place cards when Madison burst in, holding her phone like it had personally betrayed her. Did you tell Claire you're wearing a cream dress to the rehearsal dinner? Claire, one of the bridesmaids, the one with blindingly white teeth, had apparently been gossiping. It's not cream, I said. It's ecru. And it's the only nice dress I brought, besides the one for the wedding. You can't wear anything close to white, Madison hissed. Not to the rehearsal, not to the brunch, not to any event. I put the pen down slowly. Why not? It's not like I'm wearing a wedding gown. Madison looked around to make sure no one else was listening, even though it was just our mom in the room. Because you're not pure. Those 3 words hit like a slap. The room fell completely silent. Our mom suddenly became very focused on the place cards. Excuse me, I asked, voice low. You know what I mean, Madison said quickly, cheeks flushing. White symbolizes purity and traditional values. It wouldn't be appropriate. Translation: my military service. My choices made me unworthy of a color. Later that night, I overheard Madison talking to our mom in the kitchen. I just don't want her to embarrass us, she whispered. Ryan's family is so proper, and Harper is different. She's trying, our mom replied. Trying isn't enough, Madison said. This wedding has to be perfect. I slipped upstairs heart-heavy. It wasn't just the dress or the color or the makeup. It was the message beneath it all. That I didn't belong, that the real me, the person who'd survived, wasn't fit to stand beside her. And that's when I knew I needed space. I quietly checked into the local Marriott that night, alone in the calm of that beige, impersonal hotel room. I opened my suitcase. Tucked inside was a second garment bag. Not blush, not satin. It was my Army service uniform, perfectly pressed, ready, waiting. I ran my fingers over the dark blue jacket, the crisp collar, the stripes down the side of the trousers. And just for a second, I remembered who I was. Not Harper the disappointment, not Harper the inconvenient sister, but Harper Mitchell, Staff Sergeant, Bronze Star, Purple Heart. And I knew what I had to do. I woke up the next morning before the sun came up. It was wedding day. I took a long, hot shower. Not to relax, there was no relaxing, but to clear my head to steady myself. I dried off slowly, then unzipped the garment bag and laid my Army service uniform out on the hotel bed. See, dark blue jacket, white shirt, black tie, light blue trousers with the sharp gold stripe, polished black shoes. The medals I'd earned, the insignia I'd worn through 3 deployments. I'd packed it all just in case. Back then, I told myself it was a plan B. But deep down, I think I always knew. This wasn't about rebellion. This wasn't about making a scene. This was about showing up as the person I actually am. By 6:30 a.m., I had the bridesmaid dress and accessories folded neatly into one garment bag and my uniform fully pressed in the other. I arrived at the country club at exactly 7:30 a.m., just like the itinerary said. Inside, the bridal suite was buzzing with hair dryers, curling wands, mascara wands, and the low hum of bridesmaids, sipping mimosas and judging each other's contouring. Harper Madison lit up when I walked in, rushing over to hug me like none of the past few days had happened. For a moment, she was just my sister again. The one who used to help me braid my hair before school and push me on the tire swing in our backyard. "I was worried you weren't coming," she whispered. I said I would be here, I told her. No drama, no emotion, just facts. And I kept that same energy for the next few hours. I let the stylists work their magic, even though the hair extensions made me feel like a real housewife of somewhere expensive. I kept my eyes closed while they layered foundation over my skin, brushing it delicately over the scars on my shoulder. The bridesmaids made small talk around me, boyfriends' brunch plans, some minor scandal at Jillian's spin class. One of them, Caitlin, leaned over and asked, "So Harper, are you seeing anyone special?" "Not currently," I said, sipping my orange juice. "No champagne for me." "I needed to be clear-headed," Amber chimed in. "That's a shame. I bet there are tons of hot guys in the Army." "There are great people," I said gently. "But relationships are complicated when you're gone for half the year." Caitlin shivered. "I could never do what you do. Being away from civilization. No Sephora, no SoulCycle, no proper coffee. That sounds like torture." I wanted to respond. I wanted to tell her what actual torture looked like, but I didn't. I just smiled and excused myself to check my phone. The morning continued, and Madison's nerves started showing. She micromanaged everything from the position of hairpins to the shade of lip gloss we were allowed to wear. "Harper, stand straighter, but also softer," she instructed as the photographer arrived. "Angle your body slightly to the right. That hides your, you know." Her vague hand gesture floated toward my right shoulder, where the scar tissue still peeked through the makeup. I nodded and adjusted. Not because I agreed, but because I didn't want to fight. Not yet. Then came the final straw. We were lining up for the last pre-ceremony photos. Madison was glowing in her custom gown, all hand-beaded lace and drama. The rest of us, her 4 bridesmaids, fluttered around her in coordinated blush pink. Then she saw it, a thin, jagged scar beginning to peek out from the makeup on my shoulder. "Wait," Madison said, stepping toward me. "We need to fix that. It can't show in the church photos." "The makeup's irritating my skin," I said. She didn't even pause. "We'll use something else. Or maybe Jillian has a wrap. Eleanor has a pashmina that would work." Jillian offered, already digging through a bag. They all started throwing out ideas like I wasn't even there, like my body was a problem to solve, like the evidence of what I had survived was a flaw to hide. "I need a minute," I said. I walked to the bathroom, my second garment bag in hand. Once inside, I locked the door and stood still. 4 counts in, 4 counts hold, 4 counts out. The breathing technique we learned for missions. For when panic clawed at your chest and adrenaline turned your thoughts to static. Then I unzipped the garment bag and took out my Army service uniform. Piece by piece, I changed. Slowly, deliberately. Shirt, pants, jacket. I tied my black tie and straightened the ribbons on my chest. My medals gleamed in the bathroom's fluorescent light. I wiped off the heavy makeup until I saw my own face again. I pulled the extensions from my hair and tied it back in a neat bun. Not a Pinterest braid, not a romantic updo. Me. When I looked in the mirror, Staff Sergeant Harper Mitchell stared back. Not the disappointment, not the black sheep, but a soldier, a leader, someone who had saved lives and risked her own. I wasn't trying to ruin the day. I just wasn't going to ruin myself, to make it easier for everyone else. I folded the bridesmaid dress and accessories and zipped them into the empty bag. Then I squared my shoulders, lifted my chin, and stepped out of the bathroom. The bridal suite went dead silent. Every head turned. 5 faces froze. Madison lowered her champagne glass slowly. What she whispered, "Are you wearing?" The quiet in that room was louder than any battlefield I'd ever stood on. And I stood my ground. I didn't move. Hands behind my back, feet shoulder width apart. My stance? Automatic parade, rest. It was second nature by now. Something drilled into me from the beginning. Something that steadied me, even when everything around me felt like chaos. Madison blinked at me like I had suddenly grown 2 heads. "Harper," she said, her voice clipped and trembling. "This is not the time for one of your stunts. Go change back into the dress. Now." I stayed right where I was. "I can't do that." Her eyebrows shot up. "Can't or won't?" I met her eyes. Both. Around us, the other bridesmaids had gone completely still. Caitlin and Amber suddenly became fascinated by their phones. Jillian looked like she wanted to crawl under a table. "The makeup was burning my skin," I explained calmly. "And honestly, I'm tired of pretending. I'm tired of hiding who I am to make everyone else feel more comfortable." Madison's jaw clenched. "This is my wedding, Harper." "I know. Then why are you making it about you?" "I'm not," I said. "I showed up. I did my part. I was willing to wear the dress, the hair, the makeup, everything. But when you tried to erase my scars, when you made it clear that parts of me weren't acceptable in your photos, that crossed a line." Before Madison could say anything else, Jillian stepped forward, her voice low and urgent. "It's her wedding day, Harper. Don't do this. Don't be selfish." Selfish. The word stung more than it should have. I'd spent the last decade serving other people, putting their safety before mine. Sleeping in dirt, carrying 70 pounds of gear, walking into unknown danger. And now here I was being called selfish for wearing the uniform that represented all of that. Before I could reply, the door opened again and in walked our mom. She looked elegant in her silver gown hair, perfectly styled, clutch in hand. She stopped when she saw me, actually froze mid-step. Her eyes scanned me from head to toe. "Harper, what's going on?" Madison pointed, tears beginning to well up in her eyes. "She's ruining my wedding. That's what's going on. Look at her." My mom looked. She really looked. And for once, I saw something flicker behind her usually composed expression. Confusion. Maybe even understanding. "I'm not trying to ruin anything," I said softly. "I'm here just like I promised. I just can't keep pretending I'm someone else." My mother opened her mouth, but before she could respond, the door opened once more, and in came our father. He looked around the room, then at me, his eyes landing on my chest. He walked over slowly, said nothing. Then, with a gentleness I hadn't expected, he reached out and brushed his fingers across one of the medals. "This is for valor," he said almost to himself. I nodded. "Bronze Star, Kandahar." He met my eyes, and for the first time in my adult life, he really saw me. "This is who you are now?" he asked. "It always was," I replied. "You just didn't want to see it." My mother's face tightened. "Thomas, please, this isn't the time." "She served," he said, firmly cutting her off. "She bled. She earned this." Madison's hands were clenched so tightly around her bouquet that the flowers were starting to break. "I can't believe you're taking her side." Our dad turned to her, calm but unyielding. It's not about sides. It's about respect. And you need to show her some. Madison's face crumpled. This is supposed to be perfect, she whispered. And now everyone's going to be staring at her. At that exact moment, there was a knock on the door. A young woman in a headset peeked in. 10 minutes to ceremony, ladies. Photographers ready to line up. She stopped when she saw the scene. Her eyes darted from Madison to me to our parents. Should I come back? Madison straightened eyes hard again. No, we're ready. Then she turned to me. You have a choice, Harper, she said coldly. Either change back into the bridesmaid dress or you're out of the wedding party. It's that simple. I stood there, heart pounding in my chest. I'd known this moment was coming, but hearing her say it out loud still hit like a punch to the gut. I looked at my sister. Her perfect hair, her flawless makeup, her eyes full of fear, anger, and something else, something deeper. I love you, Madison, I said, voice low. And I want to be part of your day, but I'm not going to be someone. I'm not just to fit into your perfect photo album. Then you're not my maid of honor, she said, turning away. You can sit with the extended family, back row. She walked over to the wedding planner. Jillian will be maid of honor now. Caitlin takes her spot. We'll go with 4 bridesmaids instead of 5. The planner blinked, obviously not sure what just happened. But she nodded and scribbled in her binder. I gathered my things. As I reached the door, I looked back. I hope you have a beautiful day, Madison, I said. And I hope someday you'll understand. Then I stepped out into the hallway alone. I didn't cry. Not then. I walked through the long halls of the country club with my uniform on my dress shoes clicking against the polished floors, my head high. I didn't cry when I passed other bridal parties, staring at me like I didn't belong, or when a couple of staff members froze mid-step to watch me go. At the entrance to the church, one of the ushers glanced at me confused. Family of the bride, he asked, eyeing the uniform. Sister of the bride, I said. He blinked. Then something changed in his face, recognition, maybe even respect. Right this way, ma'am. He didn't lead me to the back row like Madison had ordered. He brought me to a middle pew where a few distant cousins were already seated. My cousin Leah, 10 years younger than me, and in full teenage rebellion mode, with streaks of purple in her hair, lit up when she saw me. Harper, she whispered, her eyes wide. You look amazing. Are those real medals? They are, I whispered back, surprised at how touched I felt by her excitement. That's so cool, she said. I've been thinking about enlisting after graduation. Mom and Dad are freaking out, but I don't know. I want to do something that matters, you know. And just like that, I felt like maybe even if this day wasn't going the way I hoped, something still mattered. The music changed. We all stood. Ryan and his groomsmen entered from the side. Then came the bridesmaids, 4 of them now in their blush pink dresses. Jillian at the front now, the maid of honor, holding Madison's bouquet like it was made of glass. And then Madison. She appeared at the back of the church on our father's arm, radiant in her cathedral-length gown, the very picture of grace and control. As they walked down the aisle, our father's eyes flicked to me. Briefly, there was something there, not quite a smile, not quite a nod, but a pause, a moment. Then he looked forward again, and the ceremony began. I didn't watch Madison exchange vows through bitterness. I watched through a kind of tired acceptance. She looked happy. She said her I do's with tears in her eyes and a hand on Ryan's chest. And when the crowd clapped and the minister pronounced them husband and wife, I clapped too. Not because I was part of it, but because I wanted to be decent. During the reception line, I stayed back. I didn't want to be a distraction or a spectacle. I hung to the side near a pillar in the country club lobby, sipping water and planning to slip into the reception as quietly as possible. But then, tap, tap, I turned. An older man in a crisp, tailored suit stood before me. Upright posture, military shoes even sharper than mine, Staff Sergeant, he said, offering a clean practice salute. I returned it immediately. Sir, Colonel William Hayes, retired, he introduced. Ryan's uncle. Oh, I couldn't help but notice. The ribbons, he said, eyes dropping to my chest. Bronze Star, Purple Heart, Kandahar. Yes, sir, 2018. He nodded slowly, like someone taking in more than just facts. I'd like to hear that story. Sometime, he said. In the meantime, would you do an old soldier the honor of sitting at my table unless you've got other arrangements? I smiled, really smiled for the first time that day. I'd be honored, sir. He offered me his arm. I took it. The reception hall had been transformed into something straight out of a bridal magazine. Blush roses everywhere, crystal chandeliers, ivory table linens, everything glowing under golden lighting. At Colonel Hayes' table, I met his wife Clara, their grown son and daughter, and a few other family members who didn't bat an eye at my uniform. Clara patted my hand like we'd known each other for years. I think you've rattled Eleanor's pearls, she said, with a twinkle in her eye. We all laughed. And for the first time that day, I felt like I belonged somewhere. The military's a family, the colonel said during the first course. Different than blood, but just as real. I nodded, my throat tight. My unit felt more like home than, well, home. Across the room at the head table, Madison sat glowing beside Ryan. She was laughing again, smiling. The drama of the morning, tucked neatly beneath layers of makeup and champagne. I was glad, honestly. I didn't want her day to be ruined, even after everything. But I also wasn't going to disappear just to make it easier for her. As the string quartet finished and the band began to play, Colonel Hayes stood and offered his hand again. Dance with me. Staff Sergeant? I hesitated. I'm not much of a dancer, sir. Nonsense. If you can survive a war zone, you can survive a waltz. I smiled and took his hand. We danced. Slowly, formally, the way soldiers do. And as we moved across the floor, I felt the weight of a dozen stares. Some curious, some judging, some simply confused. I ignored them. You've caused quite a stir, Colonel Hayes said quietly. Not my intention, but necessary, he replied. Good for you. From the edge of the dance floor, I spotted her, Madison. Her face unreadable. She waited until the music ended. Then she stepped forward, gliding toward us, her gown sweeping behind her. Uncle Bill, she said with a polite smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I see you've met my sister. I have, he said warmly. You didn't tell me she was decorated for valor. Bronze Star and Purple Heart. That's no small thing. Her smile faltered. Harper's always been unconventional. Brave, he corrected without blinking. The word you're looking for is brave. She said nothing, just looked at me, and then quietly said, Can we talk privately? In the bridal suite. She didn't wait for my answer. She just turned and walked. I followed. The bridal suite was still. The chaos of the morning had passed, leaving behind the faint scent of hairspray, roses, and something heavier tension. Long shadows stretched across the floor as the afternoon light filtered through gauzy curtains. Madison was already inside when I arrived, standing by the vanity where someone had left a half-drunk flute of champagne. She didn't look at me at first, just kept her eyes on her reflection in the mirror, one hand resting gently on the table, like she was trying to ground herself. You embarrassed me, she said softly, without turning around. I know, I replied. That wasn't my intention. She spun. Then slowly, her wedding gown rustling with the movement. Her eyes were glassy, but hard, in front of Ryan's family, in front of everyone. Do you even understand how much this day means to me? Yes, I said. Do you understand how much hiding myself every second of it has cost me? Her lips tightened. You could have talked to me. I tried, I said. Every time you corrected how I stood or told me to cover my scars or said I couldn't wear a certain color because I wasn't pure, what part of that was an invitation to talk? Madison flinched. Her arms crossed over her chest like armor. That was out of line. I shouldn't have said that. You think? There was a beat of silence. Why? She asked, her voice trembling. Why the uniform? Why today? Why here? Because I'm tired, I said. Tired of trying to shrink myself to fit into your image of me. Tired of acting like everything I've lived through is something to be ashamed of. She took a step toward me, her eyes suddenly shining with something that looked an awful lot like fear. I wasn't ashamed, she whispered. I was scared. I blinked. What? Madison looked down at her perfectly manicured hands. Her voice dropped so low, I had to lean in to hear her. Every time you deployed, I had nightmares. Every time you called, I was afraid it'd be the last time. And when you didn't call, I thought I was going to lose you. Her throat worked hard as she swallowed. You think I didn't care? She said. But I did. So much it hurt. But I didn't know how to say that without sounding like I didn't support you. And honestly, Harper, I didn't support you. Not at first, because it meant you were putting yourself in danger, and I couldn't understand why anyone would choose that. I stared at her, my mind spinning. All these years I thought she looked down on me. I never imagined she was afraid. And then you came home, she said, voice cracking, with medals, with stories, and suddenly Dad looked at you with this pride he'd never shown me. You were the brave one, the strong one. I've done everything they wanted, everything, and still it felt like I was just background noise. Her shoulders sagged. That's why I pushed so hard, she admitted. Why I tried to make everything perfect. Why I needed you to just fit in. Because if you stood out, if you were the one people remembered at my wedding. She didn't finish the sentence. You thought I'd steal your spotlight. No, she said, meeting my eyes. I thought I'd lose what little light I had left. It hit me then. The pressure she'd been under all her life. The expectations she carried like an invisible crown. I had rejected that world. She'd embraced it and paid the price. I'm sorry, I said quietly. I never wanted to make you feel invisible. And I didn't wear my uniform to make a point. Not really. I just needed to stop erasing myself. Madison nodded slowly. You looked proud, you know, like you belonged in it. I do, I said, just like you belong in that dress. We're both exactly where we're supposed to be, even if those places don't look the same. She gave a soft laugh, wiping a tear from under her eye before it could smudge her makeup. You know what the worst part is. I shook my head. I've always admired you, she said. Your certainty, your strength. You do what you believe in no matter what anyone thinks. I've spent my whole life trying to be what everyone expects. You've built something beautiful, I said, motioning toward the bouquet on the table. A life that works for you. I think so, she whispered. But sometimes I wonder what it would feel like to choose something just because I want it, not because it photographs well. It's never too late, I said. Madison looked at me, and something passed between us that hadn't in years. A thaw, a truce. Maybe the beginning of a real relationship, one not based on roles or expectations, but on truth. You still should have warned me, she said, half smiling now, and you still shouldn't have called me impure, I shot back. We both laughed. For the first time in a long time, it didn't feel bitter. I believe, she said, as she straightened her dress, you owe me a dance at my wedding. Yes, ma'am, I said with a mock salute. We walked back to the ballroom side by side. When the next song began, she grabbed my hand and pulled me out onto the dance floor. Ryan was waiting. Our father joined. For a moment, the four of us danced in a slow circle, awkward but real. During his toast, my father stood up, glass raised, voice shaking just a little. Today, he said, we celebrate Madison and Ryan, but also the strength of family. Madison has always been our bright light. She brings beauty, organization, and heart into everything she does. He smiled at her, then turned toward me. And Harper has shown us what courage looks like. On the battlefield, and here among those she loves. I'm more proud of both my daughters than I can possibly put into words. The room clapped. Madison's eyes found mine, and in that moment I knew something had shifted. It wasn't all healed, but it was a start. The next morning, I came downstairs early. My duffel bag was half-packed coffee still warming my hands. My uniform hung in the closet neatly folded, waiting to be worn one last time before I flew back to base. My parents were already in the kitchen. My mom sat at the breakfast bar, stirring sugar into her coffee with her usual absent-minded grace. My dad was across the table reading the paper still in his undershirt and slippers. When they saw me, both of them paused. "Morning," I said, sitting across from them. "Morning," my dad replied, folding the paper and setting it down. "Did you sleep well?" my mom asked. Her voice was soft, her smile tentative. "Better than I expected." They both nodded. The silence that followed was not awkward exactly, but thick. Like all three of us were standing on the edge of something we hadn't said for years. Finally, my mom reached across the table and rested her hand gently on mine. "Your uniform," she said, eyes focused on the sleeve peeking out from my bag. "It's impressive." Coming from her, that meant everything. "Thank you." My dad cleared his throat. "We never really asked," he said, "about your service, about what you've done, what you've seen." I looked at him. "You never seemed to want to know." He nodded, accepting that truth. "We were afraid," he said after a pause. "Afraid to hear the answers. Afraid of what it might mean." And my mom added, "We didn't understand your choice. We still might not fully understand it. But we're trying." The words settled between us like a soft landing. Not a perfect resolution, but a bridge. The doorbell rang. We all looked up. Madison and Ryan stood on the porch. She wore a simple sundress and oversized sunglasses. He had his blazer slung casually over his shoulder phone already in hand. "Just stopping by to say goodbye before we head to the airport," she said as we ushered them into the living room. She looked calm, relaxed, a complete reversal from the Madison of the past few days. We made small talk, honeymoon plans, flight schedules, whether their dog sitter could be trusted. When Ryan stepped away to take a business call, "Even on my honeymoon, the office can't survive without me." Madison turned to me. "About yesterday," she said, her voice dropping. "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. I didn't say anything right away. Just let her keep going. Not just for what I said about the dress, but for not seeing you. For not seeing who you've become. I had this image of my little sister, and I couldn't let go of it. When you chose something different, something I didn't understand, I felt like I lost you." "I'm still me," I said. "Just a more complete version." Madison smiled. "A braver version, according to Uncle Bill. He couldn't stop talking about you last night. I think he wants to recruit you into the family." "He's a good man," I said. "Ryan's lucky to have him." "And I'm lucky to have you," she replied, the words awkward but sincere. "Even when you're being impossibly stubborn." I grinned. "It runs in the family." We hugged at the door. Not one of those stiff formal ones we'd traded at holidays. This one was real, honest. It held weight. After they left, the house felt quiet, but not empty. Something had changed. I could feel it in the way my dad didn't go back to his paper, in the way my mom sat with her coffee, not saying anything, just watching me like she was finally seeing something she hadn't let herself notice before. A few weeks later, I was back on base. Life returned to its rhythm. Training drills new recruits who looked too young and too eager. But I felt different. lighter, the kind of peace that comes not from compromise, but from standing your ground and still finding connection on the other side. Then a surprise. Madison came to visit. It was her first time on a military base, and she showed up in a designer sundress and wedge heels clearly overdressed for the North Carolina humidity. But she smiled through it all, even when the guards at the gate gave her a hard time. "This isn't what I expected," she said, looking around. "It's normal." "What did you think it would be?" "I don't know." "Barbed wire? Yelling more camouflage. Movies have a lot to answer for." She laughed. And I realized I hadn't heard her laugh like that in a long time. I showed her my office, the rec room, the chow hall. I introduced her to a few of my friends, soldiers who had served with me in Afghanistan, men and women who knew me better than my own family did. She asked questions. Good ones. She listened. At dinner, in my small off-base apartment, she helped me cook, sat on the floor with my dog, laughed with my friends. She watched the way we moved, the way we spoke in shorthand and inside jokes. And later, as we cleaned up dishes, she said something that stayed with me. "I get it now," she said. "Why you chose this. Why it means so much. These people, they're your family too." "Different from blood," I replied, quoting Colonel Hayes, "but no less real." "I'm glad you found your place," she said, voice soft. "Even if it's not the place any of us expected." That Christmas, I brought a friend home with me. Rachel, one of my closest friends in the Army, had no family to go back to. My parents welcomed her like she was one of their own. My dad asked her real questions. My mom made her homemade cranberry bread and asked if she needed anything for the guest room. Madison and Ryan arrived late on Christmas Eve, glowing and full of news. "We're expecting," she announced after dinner. "Due in the summer." The room erupted in congratulations, hugs, champagne. Later, after everyone had gone to bed, Madison knocked on my door. "We want you to be the godmother," she said. Ryan and I both agreed. "You're the strongest person I know, and I want our child to have that kind of example in their life." I stared at her stunned. Then I managed to whisper, "On one condition." She raised an eyebrow. "No forcing the kid to wear pink if they hate it." She laughed. "Deal." Spring came quickly that year. I'd just wrapped up a month of field training when I got an unexpected email from my old high school. Someone on the alumni board had heard about my story, maybe from a parent, maybe from local news, and they wanted me to speak at Career Day. To be honest, I hesitated. I'd spent most of high school trying to keep my head down, feeling like a round peg in a square world. I remembered what it felt like to sit in those auditorium seats, listening to guest speakers talk about law school finance, medical residencies' lives that felt 1,000 miles away from my own. But maybe that was the point. So I said yes. A week later, I stood on a stage in the very same auditorium I'd once slouched in as a student. Rows of teens looked back at me with a mixture of curiosity and boredom. But a few of them, just a few, had that spark in their eyes, that searching look I remembered so well. I told them about my path, about joining the Army, about the good days and the bad, the discipline, the heartbreak, the pride. I didn't sugarcoat anything, but I also didn't hold back. I told them that your worth isn't defined by how well you fit into other people's expectations. It's defined by your courage to live authentically, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. And when I finished, there was silence, then applause. After the session ended, a girl approached me in the hallway, 16, maybe 17. Bright eyes, nervous hands. "I've been thinking about enlisting," she said, "but my parents are freaking out. They want me to go to college. They keep saying the military isn't for people like me." "College is a great path," I told her, "but it's not the only path." She nodded. "I want to serve. I want to be part of something bigger than myself." I looked at her for a long moment. In her, I saw myself, the younger version, full of questions and defiance, terrified of making the wrong move, but more terrified of living small. It won't be easy, I said, and there are going to be people who won't understand. Some will judge you. Some will say you're wasting your life. She looked down. That's what my uncle said, that I'd come back broken. I took a deep breath. Was it worth it for me? Absolutely. Not because it was easy, but because I became the kind of person I never thought I could be. Someone who shows up. Someone who leads. Someone who doesn't apologize for existing differently. Her eyes welled up. Thank you. She left that day walking a little taller. And I left with the sense that maybe the hardest things we go through aren't just for us. They're for someone else down the line who needs to see what's possible. A few weeks later, I got a call from Madison. Do you still have that uniform? She asked. I laughed. I have more than one, believe it or not. Right. Of course, she said. Would you wear it to the baby shower? That one caught me off guard. Why? Because Ryan's cousin is bringing her teenage son, she said, and he's thinking about enlisting. I want him to meet you. I paused. Really? I want you there as you, she said. Not just as Aunt Harper, but as Staff Sergeant Mitchell. It was such a small sentence, but it hit hard, because it meant she finally saw me, all of me. When I showed up at the shower, people turned to look again, just like at the wedding. But this time, Madison walked over, placed a hand on my arm, and said, "This is my sister. She's a soldier and a hero." No one argued with her. That summer, Madison gave birth to a beautiful baby girl, Lena Grace. The first time I held her, she wrapped her tiny hand around my finger and wouldn't let go. "I'm going to spoil you," I whispered, "but also teach you how to throw a punch." Madison laughed. "Only if I get to teach her how to pair shoes with her outfits." Deal. We made a lot of deals after that. Small things. Holiday rotations. Family dinner schedules. Babysitting duty. But the biggest one, we promised to see each other for who we really were, not for who we thought we were supposed to be. And that made all the difference. Because the truth is, not every family gets a big dramatic reunion. Some get silent healing. Some get slow progress. Some get small gestures. We got all three. The night before I deployed again, Madison called me. "I know I'm not supposed to say this, because you'll roll your eyes," she said. "Try me. I'm proud of you." I didn't roll my eyes. I just closed mine and let it sink in. The deployment was shorter this time. 6 months in Kuwait, mostly logistics and training support. No direct combat. No IEDs. Still, the heat was merciless. The days long, the nights quiet in a way that made you think too much. But something was different. This time, I had letters from home. Real ones. From my parents. From Rachel. From Madison. She sent updates on Lena, how she'd smiled for the first time, how she hated naps, but loved looking at ceiling fans. Photos came, with each letter Lena in a onesie that said Future Trailblazer Madison, with circles under her eyes, and a proud smile, Ryan holding their daughter like she was a fragile piece of moonlight. One letter stood out. Madison's handwriting was messier than usual, rushed, but real. "I still don't understand everything you've been through, but I want to. I want Lena to grow up knowing her aunt is a fighter, not just on the battlefield, but in life. You inspire me, Harper. You always have. I just couldn't admit it until now." I kept that one folded in my jacket pocket, read it on hard days, carried it into briefings, into long walks between barracks, into silence. When I came home, Lena was walking. She ran straight into my arms at the airport, like she'd been waiting her whole life. "Hi, Auntie," she squealed, tiny arms around my leg. Madison stood behind her phone and hand tears in her eyes. "She calls you her superhero," she said, "even though I told her you don't wear a cape." "She's not wrong," I said, lifting Lena into my arms. Just a different kind of uniform. Back at my parents' house, things had shifted too. My mom cooked my favorite meal, meatloaf, mashed potatoes, buttered corn. My dad asked about my commanding officer, the missions we ran, the challenges we faced. He didn't flinch at the hard parts. He didn't change the subject. He just listened. Rachel came by for dinner that week. Madison brought Lena over, and they all sat around the table like a mismatched but functioning machine. Halfway through dessert, Madison cleared her throat. "So, Harper," she said, glancing at Ryan. "We've been talking." Ryan nodded, letting her speak. "And we want you to be in Lena's life in a bigger way. Not just as godmother, but really a constant. Your family, and not the kind we whisper about at weddings. The kind we brag about." I didn't know what to say. Ryan reached into his jacket and pulled out a photo frame. Inside was a picture of Lena holding one of my medals with both hands. Below it, a small plaque read, "To my Aunt Harper, the bravest woman I'll ever know." I cried, not silently, not neatly, but full-on shoulder-shaking tears in front of everyone. No one tried to hush me. No one tried to fix it. They just let me feel. And that's when I realized this wasn't just about weddings or uniforms or family pressure. This was about legacy, about the way we live our lives and how those lives ripple out to others, even when we don't realize it. Because what I had fought for wasn't just freedom in the political sense. It was the freedom to be fully myself and to show the people I love how to do the same. One night, months later, Madison and I sat on the porch of our parents' house. The summer air was heavy with crickets and distant lawnmowers. Lena was asleep inside. "You know," Madison said, sipping her tea, "I used to think I had to be perfect. That if I wasn't, people would stop loving me." I nodded. "I thought I had to be tough all the time. That if I showed weakness, I'd lose respect." And now, she asked, "I've learned that authenticity earns more than either of those things." She smiled. "Same." We sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then she added, "Do you ever think about what your life would have been like if you'd gone to Fairfield Community College instead?" "All the time," I said, "and I'm glad I didn't." "Me too." Later that night, I looked through an old photo album from our childhood. Page after page of Easter dresses, birthday cakes, piano recitals, scraped knees. And then there it was, a photo I hadn't seen in years. Little me, 7 or 8, covered in mud, holding a frog triumphantly in both hands. Madison beside me in a frilly pink dress, looking half amused, half horrified. We were different even then, but side by side, it made me smile. It reminded me that the real victories aren't always the ones we wear on our chest. Sometimes they're the ones we carry quietly. In forgiveness, in change, in choosing to show up again and again, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. The following spring, I was invited back to my high school again, not for career day this time, but to deliver the keynote at graduation. The principal said it was the students' choice. "They voted for you," she said with a smile. "Said your story made them feel seen." I stood backstage in full uniform, watching the sea of caps and gowns file into the auditorium. The class of seniors was rowdy, excited, full of that electric hope only 18-year-olds have. Some of them had heard me speak last year. A few saluted me playfully as they passed, and I returned it with a smile. When it was time, I walked on stage, to polite applause, scanning the crowd for familiar faces. My parents were in the second row. Madison sat beside them, holding Lena in her lap. Ryan had his arm around them both, and in the front row, I spotted Leah, my cousin, now sporting a ROTC badge on her blazer, and a grin that said she had already chosen her path. I stepped up to the podium, took a breath, and began. "Graduates," I said, "you've probably been hearing the same messages all week. Chase your dreams, follow your heart, don't give up. And that's good advice. But I want to tell you something a little different." I paused, letting the room settle. "I want to talk about identity, about how hard it is to hold on to who you are when everyone around you has already decided who you should be. I told them about being the daughter who didn't go to college, the sister who broke the mold, the soldier who wore scars and medals with equal weight. I told them about standing alone in a bridal suite, surrounded by blush pink and disapproval, and choosing to put on the uniform anyway. Sometimes I said, your biggest battle won't be out there in the world, it'll be the one inside you, between who you are and who others expect you to be. I looked at the graduates, letting the words land. But here's what I've learned. When you stop hiding, when you stop apologizing, when you stand tall in the truth of who you are, you'll be surprised how many people finally see you. The auditorium was quiet. A few students nodded slowly. A teacher wiped her eyes. Lena, too young to understand, clapped from her seat. After the ceremony, I was swarmed by students asking questions, parents thanking me, a handful of teachers reminiscing about the rebel girl who used to get detention for climbing trees during lunch breaks. Later, back at my parents' house, we had a barbecue in the backyard, just like when we were kids. Only this time, there were new additions, Rachel now a fixture in our family, Ryan holding Lena while wearing an apron that said Grill Sergeant, Madison barefoot in the grass, laughing without worrying who was watching. We sat on the deck as the sun dipped behind the trees, casting everything in gold. Madison turned to me. Do you remember the tiara? I blinked. What? You were 13. I had just won Miss Teen Fairfield. You snuck into my room and tried on my crown. I laughed. You caught me. I didn't get mad, she said. I remember fixing it on your head in the mirror. I said you could do pageants too. Do you remember what you said? I nodded slowly. Not my thing. She smiled. You were right. You weren't meant to wear a tiara. You were meant to wear something stronger. She reached down and lifted Lena onto her lap. And now my daughter gets to grow up with an aunt who shows her what strength really looks like. That night, after everyone had gone home, I sat on my childhood bed, now once again a guest room, and opened a message on my phone from Leah. It was short. Just finished my ROTC paperwork. Thanks for being my North Star. I stared at the screen for a long moment, then typed back. You already had the compass. I just reminded you it works. As I lay down, I thought about all the versions of myself I'd been. The tree-climbing kid, the rebellious teenager, the soldier with dirt on her boots and steel in her spine, the sister who finally stopped chasing approval, and now the aunt, the mentor, the example. I'd come home more than once, but this time I'd arrived, fully, authentically, without apology. So if you're watching this, maybe wondering if you should say something, wear something, stand your ground for something even when it's hard, I hope my story helps, because your worth, it was never up to them. It's in your courage to live your truth, especially when the world tells you to shrink. So tell me in the comments, have you ever stood up for yourself in a moment that mattered? Have you ever chosen to be real, even when it meant standing alone? Share your story below. And if this video spoke to you, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. We've got more stories coming your way. Stories about choosing strength, choosing truth, choosing you. Thanks for being here. And remember, your scars don't make you less. They prove you survived.